We open to a large city, which must be more enlightened than most because it has a working public transportation system. That system's brought in some newcomers from the looks of things, as they're more interested in their surroundings than commuters would be, and none more so than a certain Starfleet captain we know. She's out of uniform, and I do hope that doesn't mean she's going undercover again. I struggle to think of a time when that hasn't gone pear-shaped. We report to a supervisor of some sort, this apparently being Janeway's first day on the job. She says she thinks it'll be better than her last one, and I'll admit that monitoring reactors doesn't run quite as much risk of doing another genocide, so she might have a point. Or possibly not. When we rejoin her after the title sequence, she's fiddling with one of the reactors. Well, I say fiddling, more getting it wrong and running the risk of starting a catastrophic failure. Another worker hears the warning as Janeway's trying to plead with it to not explode, and stops things before they're all glow in the dark. He also introduces himself, which probably means he's important, so let's give him a name of our own to try and distract our attention from the questions raised by them all wearing a leather jacket over bare skin. The Wheel of Names decrees that our new guy will be known as... Marvin Trillian, volunteered by Commander Tara Polan. The conversation Marvin and Janeway were about to have is derailed by Seven, who's also a new employee. What a coincidence. She's the new efficiency monitor, because of course she is, and tells them to get on with their shit instead of yapping. She also introduces herself as Annika, a name she avoids due to the associations. How curious. She leaves, and Marvin Trillian suggests to Janeway that they move their fraternizing to a date after work. Jesus Christ, son, you've only known her for 60 seconds, and 30 of those were spent talking to Seven. Janeway seems of a similar opinion and shuts him down, saying this new job means she doesn't have the time for socializing. It's a bold excuse for someone who works at the same place and knows that you're bullshitting, but the blow is softened somewhat by them making eyes at each other after he walks away. Janeway and Seven aren't the only Voyager crew with new jobs, though Paris has already managed to lose his. That's what he's telling the bartender anyway, while also asking for work. Presumably that would make her either a manager or an owner as well as the bartender. She says getting fired during a labour shortage makes him a particularly impressive kind of fuck-up, and that's the second mention of places needing workers in the first 10 minutes, so put it on your plot point list. Rather delightfully, it sounds like he was working at the same place as Janeway and got shit-canned by Seven. Good for her. Perhaps taken with his decision to be honest about what happened, the manager/owner agrees to give Paris a chance, whilst also having no illusions about how it'll probably turn out. The bar's filling with workers later on, including Marvin Trillian and another gentleman we recognise. Tuvok laughs at the anecdote Marvin tells, so we're into something very odd territory. Janeway arrives as well, here to eat and read some work manuals, but that doesn't stop Marvin from joining her because he has all the subtlety of one of Neelix's suits. That's nearly half of the main cast accounted for, and we tip over 50% when B'Elanna arrives. She doesn't seem to be enjoying the new situation as much as everybody else we've seen though, as, after taking a look around, she thinks better of being here and buggers off. Janeway and Marvin Trillian do the same a little later, and he walks her home. That's not quite the same gesture when you consider he lives in the same employee housing block, but it's the thought that counts. They chat on the way, and Marvin gets some information about Janeway's home, with her describing Earth as a bit of a shithole and how much better it is here. How curious. Marvin tries to push his luck some more, and Janeway declines, though not entirely dismissively. Maybe this is why she wanted a different job to Starship Captain. It's another work day, and Janeway's surprised by another alarm. Not one she caused this time, but according to Marvin, just a call to get your totally normal, nothing to worry about, definitely not dodgy injections. Aren't we lucky to have such considerate employers? They're for everybody at the plant, much to the distress of Tuvok, who's apparently afraid of injections now. Hardly surprising given the flashback it causes, one of him being restrained and forcefully medicated back when he was still in a Starfleet uniform. Let's catch up with the rest of the cast, shall we? Chakotay, Neelix and Kim are on the Delta Flyer Junior and returning to Voyager. Kim's a little ill and says this is the worst away mission ever, which is a pretty fucking bold statement considering he's been put into a space prison, turned into a mushroom, and literally killed. His day's not likely to improve either. Voyager isn't where it's supposed to be and nobody's picking up the phone. Understandable, really, given the circumstances. Voyager's parked in some space fog and everything's buggered. The doc's in emergency command mode from the looks of the jacket, and working by himself in engineering suggests he's the only person left. An alarm tells him there are a couple of intruders on the bridge, but we don't know who. Not to worry, as it's just Kim and Chakotay wearing suits because life support isn't working. There's nobody else on board, so it wasn't at the top of the doc's list. Chakotay wants to know what the bloody hell's going on, so it's time for a flashback. Voyager hit a space mine and got all kinds of fucked up. Even worse, the crew were getting poisoned by radiation from something in the area. What thing? Dunno, but the mine's probably not a coincidence. Either way, the crew couldn't hang about as they'd all cark it, so Janeway left the dock to clear up the mess after giving him command, while everybody else buggered off to the nearest planet in escape pods. We'll assume they had a good reason for not taking the shuttles as well, what with the teleporters and replicators and such. Shortly after they left him, another ship found Voyager and tried to nick it. What an interesting coincidence. They hadn't expected to find anybody aboard, much less somebody who started pooping at them. Some incoming backup made the dock decide to leg it and hide, which brings us up to date, save for the fact that the dock did a science to match the ships with that mine they hit. Now we just have to find out what happened to everybody else. Another flashback from Tuvok can help with that. Seeing Janeway has triggered it from the looks of things, as it's about the pair of them being rescued and treated by some random guys. An injection of totally safe radiation treatment seemed reasonable to him, but watching them put a weird laser mask over Janeway's head caused him to try and intervene. We already know how that turned out for him. If he remembers bits, maybe she will too, so Tuvok thinks it's time to find out. She recognizes him, but only from their work together here, and doesn't know anything about treatment or a hospital with him. He gets a bit handsy, and Marvin Trillian steps in to see if everything's all right. Not wanting to make a scene, Tuvok agrees with Janeway that it's just a misunderstanding, and scarpers. Misunderstandings happen with Paris too. He sees B'Elanna in the bar and tries hitting on her. Learning that she's pregnant makes him assume she's married. He's technically right, but she doesn't know this and says she's not, presumably having been provided with the same brain juice as everybody else at the power plant. I wonder if this means Paris isn't being given the same stuff anymore and will start to remember. His normally quick tongue fails to help him recover, and B'Elanna leaves the pub. Smooth. Voyager's being brought back to something approaching functionality. Most of the main stuff is online, and we know how to spot those mines and the buggers that try to rob us now, so we begin looking for the crew. Not everything's positive, though. Kim's still feeling a bit dodgy, a repeat suggesting that it might be important later, and the doc bristles a little at not being in charge anymore, but scanners finding the crew on a planet a few days away has refocused everybody. If Janeway's any indication, there's a chance that not everybody in Voyager's crew will want to leave their new lives, even if they're found. She's having dinner with Marvin Trillian. Actually, that's a lie. She's burning dinner with Marvin Trillian, and after deciding that it's awful, says they should dine elsewhere. Marvin declines and suggests they should stay in, as he has a different idea. Janeway loses one appetite and gains another, before latching onto his face. Looks like their evening might involve some eating out after all. Voyager's arrived at the planet where we detected the crew, though the authorities are being less than helpful. The guy on the screen says he's talked to some of them and they don't know anything about a starship. Also, they're happy and productive here. Also, fuck off or we'll shoot you. Sounds completely above board, as does the shield around the planet preventing teleportation. Chakotay doesn't think taking on a whole planet is the answer, so we scarper somewhere else to consider our next move. As Janeway and Marvin are basking in a post-coital glow, Paris is trying to hit on B'Elanna again. Except, no, he's not. She assumes he is, but what he's actually offering is to introduce her to a couple who are expecting their own baby so she can have some moral support. Perhaps he's been saving up his decent human being allowance for the last 6 seasons so he can spend it all in one go right here. Whatever the cause, B'Elanna's taken aback, and after she establishes that it'll be nothing more, they agree to be friends. They might be joined by more shortly. Neelix hasn't been able to learn anything about the crew from some starship captains in the area, but he has had several job offers. There's a shortage of workers throughout the whole sector, and that gives Chakotay an idea. A few calls to inquire about job openings, combined with a bit of surgery from the dock and the use of Neelix's ship, and we have our way onto the planet. And some implanted comm badges in their hands, which allow us to teleport through the shield, according to Kim, means we have a way off it again, too. Their arrival comes none too soon. Tuvok's been avoiding the totally normal injections, and it's resulted in him regaining some of his memories. Seven doesn't know what he's talking about when he tries to call her by that name, so he attempts a mind meld to make her understand. He's dragged away by security, but not before she sees herself regenerating. The replacement for his job is Chakotay, which is a handy coincidence. Once the supervisor has buggered off, he tries to make contact with Janeway, only to realise that she has no idea who he is. He recovers well and introduces himself anew, saying the supervisor pointed her out as a potential source of help if he had questions. Neelix has found his way to the bar Paris is working in and got chatting. He's a lot better at undercover work than Chakotay, mining Paris for information and testing him without making himself a target. Paris has adapted well to the bartender life, he says, and is enjoying it too. I wonder how much stock shrinkage there's been since he started. Chakotay arrives to pool their data. Neelix has seen a few people from Voyager and none of them recognized him. There's another odd thing that Chakotay has noticed. Everybody here loves their jobs, almost as though it was behaviour instilled in them. I'd argue this raises some questions about how Paris managed to get fired, but let's ignore that for now. Janeway and Marvin Trillian turn up, the former inviting Chakotay and Neelix to join them. Marvin uninvites them as he wants to talk to Janeway alone. See, it'll be more awkward to invite her to move in with him if there's an audience. As they're celebrating, Chakotay and Neelix are following B'Elanna. Trying to convince her that they know her goes straight down the shitter, so they just grab her instead. It's a hell of a plan, and her screams bring a security patrol who arrive just in time to see Neelix and B'Elanna disappear. How did Voyager get close enough to teleport without being spotted by the people who threatened to shoot them? I have no idea, but we'll assume it has something to do with reasons. Chakotay's shit out of luck when it becomes his turn to leave, as some ships have started attacking Voyager, so Kim's forced to leg it. Either that or he's finally taken the initiative on getting promoted. That leaves Voyager being chased, Neelix and the doc in sickbay with a scared B'Elanna, Tuvok on the receiving end of a brainial flashy thing, and Chakotay in a dead end while being hunted by a security team, as we're told the story is to be continued. Well, this is refreshing, isn't it? I've said of past episodes that the ones which prove memorable tend to be the ones that break free of the standard template. That's often meant spending less time with the main cast, such as Distant Origin or Blink of an Eye, so it's nice to prove that we can do the same thing by transplanting the cast somewhere else. I'm not entirely sure why this one is connecting with me in a way that Future's End didn't, as that performed a similar sort of transplant. Perhaps the inherent time fuckery of that plot was acting as a barrier, or perhaps the fact that much of the crew are part of this story rather than a driving force behind it is serving to make them more relatable. There's a certain novelty to Janeway and many of the others being bystanders rather than active protagonists. Come to think of it, maybe that ties into something I've mentioned previously about enjoying stories where the characters are humbled by events, a relatability that comes from seeing them as mere mortals rather than the scientific superheroes we're often presented with. As to how that's achieved, I'd be the first to acknowledge that memory loss stuff isn't exactly original, but we do enough with it here to make it interesting, and it gives us the excuse for characters to do things they normally wouldn't. Take Paris, for example. I wonder how much of his memory has been retained, and what level of influence that potential deletion has had on his behaviour. It also sets us up for the inevitable big red reset button to be believable in the context of the story. The premise does raise a few questions. How did they manage to build an industrial complex with insufficient labour to support itself in the first place? And where are all these products and services going if people are thin on the ground? Are we supporting a hidden elite who live in decadence, a sort of Eloy to the workforce's Morlock, or is the planet simply geared towards exports? If the latter, who's benefiting from that? And how much of the workforce is employed in making and administering the injections to keep the workforce? Same question with the security guards who drag away people that remember. If a sizable portion of your labour pool is spent keeping the kidnap victims in working order, so to speak, is it really more productive than just using your native population and cutting out all of that nefarious shit you've been doing? That's a lot of questions, but we enjoy such ponderings here, and the story still has another 40 minutes to give us answers. It probably won't, of course, but let's not allow the cynicism of experience to dampen our hopes. That's what Part 2 is for. End of episode.
What's this Deep Space Nine like then?
Dunno. It's only just been taken over by the Bajorans after the Cardigans legged it.
Hold on a minute. Didn't Voyager launch from Deep Space Nine?
Yes, but that won't happen until 2 years after we get back.
How does that work?
Time fuckery.
Fair enough.
At least it'll be better than getting shot at every week. I'm looking forward to a nice quiet few years.
And absolutely nothing to worry about on the shapeshifter front either. Woof.